Today I'm going to show you how to create a table inside your website, because tables is something that is sometimes really nice to have when we want to show data or some other kind of things that fit really nice inside a table, with different columns and rows and things like that. So we're going to do that in this video here. And as you can see, I have a very basic website in front of me, and I'm just sort of going to go over what exactly I have here. So as you can see, I have a very basic page that just has a main.css file, which is the main style sheet for this website. I do also have a reset style sheet just to include it, because that is a good habit to do. And I do also have a section tag down here inside my body tag that has a class set to wrapper main. So essentially, as you might have guessed, we just have a very basic wrapper that goes in and says, okay, the content should not be any longer than 900 pixels. I do also have a dark background color for this example here, but I do think that in this one example today, it might actually be better to have a white background, since this is going to be something that we have to see using borders and different things. So having a white background, I think, is a little better idea to better show off a table. And then I do also have a font that I included inside my project here, just so we have some kind of font that I can use in order to actually do something to, make the text look a little bit better than the default fonts that we have. So with all of this, what I can do is I can go inside my body tag, inside the section tag, and we can start by creating a table. So the way we do that is simply by saying that we want to create a table element, which is a HTML element we have inside the HTML language. And the next thing we want to do is declare a row inside the table. So we're working from a row to row basis. So first you create the first row, and then you create the second row, and then you just continue building downwards inside the table. So the way we do that is by declaring a TR, which is a table row. And inside this table row, you have to either define a table header or a table data. So let's say we just go in here and say we have a table data, so TD, and we can say that, for example, this is going to be, let's make this table into like a list of names, different people with different eye colors and hair colors and different things, just to have some kind of data to show off. So in the first data here, I want to have a name. So that could, for example, be Daniel, which is my name. And then I want to declare the second column, which is by adding another table data. So in this case here, I could say eye color is going to be blue. And I can also go ahead and declare a third table data, which is of course a third column. And I can go ahead and say this one should be, what is my hair color? Dark blonde, I think I am. We call it leverpostej colored here in Denmark, which is like a piece of food that we compare the color to. But, I think I'm dark blonde. Let's go ahead and add one more piece of data. So we're going to say we have a age of the person. So right now for me, that is going to be 31. I'm almost turning 32. And what I can do is I can actually show off how this is going to look like. And just keep in mind the background for the website is white right now. So just kind of like hold your eyes for a second and get adjusted to the white background here. When I go in and refresh it, you can see that we have a little bit of data up here, and that is within my wrapper, which is why it's not going all the way to the left side. But as you can see, I have the different pieces of data. I know it is kind of tiny, and that's because the default font size right now is kind of tiny. So what I could do is I could actually go inside my website, and let's just go ahead and declare a font size. So I could go inside my body tag here and just say we have a font size, or at least a default font size. And I can set this one to 30 pixels, just so we have a little bit we can see inside the browser. So when I refresh it, we can actually see the data in here. But you will notice a couple of things, which is that right now it just kind of looks like text that is next to each other. We don't actually have any sort of cells, any sort of columns or rows or borders or anything. So this is just like a very bare bone table. So what I can do is I can go back in here and I can actually add a second person just to do that, because we do need to have more than just one row. So I'm going to create a second row. Just going to go in here and paste it down. And we can go ahead and add in the name of another person. So in this case here, I could take Basse, my dog. He's sitting next to me. So we can say Basse, and we can say that his eye color is brown. He does also have, what should we call that? White/black hair color. And I think he's turning like 5. I think he is soon. I'm not sure. My wife is gonna come after me after this episode here. So after adding Basse in here, I can go and save it, refresh the browser, and as you can see, we now have more data. You will also notice that we have a little bit of spacing inside the first row now, which is because all the different columns inside a table has to have the same width. So right now, because brown is a longer word than blue, it is going to add a little bit more spacing to adjust for the, the text inside the second row down here. So with this, I now want to go back in here and let's actually go ahead and add a header for all these different ones, because right now we don't actually know what does blue mean. We don't really know what this means. So what I could do is I can go above everything and create another table row, but instead I'm going to create a table header, which is th. So in this case here, I can go in and say name, and then I can also go ahead and just copy paste this one a couple of times, because we need to have the same amount as in everything else down here. So in the second one, we're going to say I color. I'm also going to add the third one, which is going to be hair color. And the last one is going to be age. So after doing this, going back inside the website, refreshing, you're now going to notice that we have some more up here. But the difference is that this is considered to be a table header. And of course, right now, we can't really see any sort of differences, when it comes to the styling. But essentially, this is meant for you to be able to go inside the styling and target the header specifically, so you can style the header differently than all the table data inside the table. So let's go ahead and do that. Inside the main.css, I want to make sure that I choose the font that I actually imported into my project here, because why not just use the font that I have already? So I'm just going to go ahead and add a font family, which is going to be Roboto. Again, you can use any kind of font that you want. And then I want to go down below and I want to add my table header and I want to style it. So inside the table header here, I can go ahead and say that I want to have maybe a font weight inside of here. So I can add a font weight to, so I'm going to make this one bold. If I were to do that, go back inside the website, refresh it, you can now see that we have a bold, font for the header up here. But again, the table still looks kind of weird. We don't have any borders and the width is kind of off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and inside my styling, I'm going to grab my table and I'm going to set this one to have a width. So I'm going to set the width to 100%, which is 900 pixels because it's inside a wrapper right now. So if I were to do that, you're going to notice that everything else gets spread out. Whenever you just give your table 100%, it is going to automatically go in and just divide things out so it makes sense inside this table here. We can also go in and change the columns individually. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But right now, as you can see, we have this table going on. I do also want to show you that we don't just have to have the table header inside one row. We can also do it on the left side here if you want to have it downwards. So the way you would do that is just simply by going inside your index page. And then instead of having the table header in here inside one row, you can actually add the table header inside each of these individually. So you could actually go down here, add a table header. I'm just going to mess things up a little bit here and just copy paste a couple of times just to kind of show you. But basically, the first one in each row is a table header. So you can actually see all three of them get highlighted right now. And then we have table data inside all the other ones down here. So if we were to save this, go inside my website, refresh it, you can now see that everything is bold over here on the left side. So again, you can customize this table in any way that you want to. You can make the headers in the left side, on the right side, on the top, or mix them in between. You can do whatever you want. But I'm just going to go back to what we had before and make sure that all the table headers in here are inside the first row. And now whenever you want to customize anything inside this table here, being the headers or the data, you can just go inside your CSS file, go down and actually target either the header or the data by saying TD. And then say we might want to have a border set to 1 pixel, solid, and let's make it dark. So if we were to go back inside the website, refresh it, you can now see that we have a border around all the table data, but not inside the headers. So of course, if you want to do that, you can just go back inside the CSS file and add this piece of styling inside the header as well. So we can go up here and add that in here. And as you'll see, we now have everything bordered. Let's go ahead and thicken it a little bit because I can see that on my video here, it is kind of looking a little bit tiny. So we can just make it 2 pixels instead, just to make sure you can actually see it. So there we go. Next, I want to show you how to take up more than one cell space inside this table here. So if I were to go back inside my HTML, you can see that right now we have an even number of table data and table headers. But let's say I want to take up 2 columns when it comes to, for example, the table headers up here. So what I can do is I can just go in and say col span as an attribute, and I can set this one equal to 2. Now, because I do this, it kind of makes sense that we don't need to have the second one in here. So I can actually go and delete the second header, save this one, go back inside my website, and as you can see, we now have name taking up 2 columns of spacing. So you can also do that if you want to do that. We can do the same thing when it comes to the rows, so we can also go downwards instead. So if we were to actually go ahead and remove this, we can now see that if I were to go inside and instead say row span and take up 2, I can now go down to the next row, which also means that I need to remove one piece of data from inside the next one. So if we do that and go back inside the website, you can now see that we're taking up 2 rows of spacing. So you can take up multiple cells inside this table here, depending on how you define this span when it comes to the columns and rows. So just so you know how to do that, this is how you would actually go about doing that. Let's go ahead and go back again. So we have all the default data that we had before, like so. So I'm just going to refresh here. Now, I did mention that inside the table here, all the columns are being auto-fixed when it comes to the width, but we can actually go inside and customize these individually. What you can do is you can go in and target one specific row column inside this table here, so just one of them, and give it a certain width. So if I were to go in and say that this eye color column inside the header here should be a certain width, then all the other rows below it, or at least inside the same column, are going to adjust to that size. So just to demonstrate, if I were to go in here, I could actually set a style attribute and set a width to something specific. So in this case, if we could set it to 100 pixels. And if I were to save this and go inside the website, you can now see that this one over here is actually being adjusted. So right now it is only 100 pixels and everything else is just kind of going to take up the space automatically. Of course, this is quite tiny, so we could also give it something quite a bit larger. So we could go in and say 300 pixels, go back in here and then resize this. And now we can see we have 300 pixels when it comes to this column down here. And of course, there are other ways you can style it by going inside, and adding a style attribute. You could, of course, just go ahead and go inside your style sheet and you could just create a path to this particular piece of data. So in this case here, I could go in and say we have a table and we also have a table row, and inside this table row we have a table data. That I could take the nth child and say that I want the second one to have this certain size. So in this case here, I'll go in and say that I need to have a width set to 400 pixels this time, so we can actually see a difference in it. Save it, go back inside the website, refresh it, and now you can see that we get a 400 pixel increase. So you can also do it using a style sheet. And the same thing goes for the height, by the way. So if I were to go a little bit further down, let's say I want to go to the second row, which is maybe this one down here, and I want to take the Daniel one. What I can do is I can add a style tag and I can set a height to 200 pixels. And if I were to go back inside the website, you'll now notice that this particular column here, or inside this row, is going to get a much larger height when it comes to that row of data. Now, I can't really see when you would be using this, but just so you know how to increase the height of these different columns and rows inside the table, this is how you would do it. But now let's talk a bit more about when it comes to borders inside this table here. So right now you can see that we have a border around every single cell in here because we went inside our style sheet and said that we wanted every single table header and every single table data to have a border. But what I can also do is I can also add a border around my table. Now you won't actually be able to see this because we do also have a border around all the other elements down here. But if I were to go in here and say I want to increase it to 4 pixels, we can now see it by going inside the website, refreshing, and then you can see the entire table is going to get a border. So essentially these different borders here are actually merging together inside the table. It is called border collapse, I believe, in order to do that, which is toggled on by default, as we can tell. But in this case here, you can see that we can create a border around the entire table if you want to do that. Now you can, of course, go inside and actually target all these different elements at the same time. So we can say we have a table, we can go in and say we have a table header, and we also have a table data. And if I were to go in here and write border dash collapse, I do believe we have it here. There we go. And if I were to set this one to collapse, this is what would actually cause it to merge all these borders together. So if we were to do that, you can see we have no changes right now because it does it automatically. But if I were to go in here and set it to separate, then it is going to separate these borders. And as you can see, we get a thicker border because now they're not merging together anymore. Now, if you decided to separate the different borders, you can also go in here and add a border radius, which is not going to work if you collapse all the borders together. But if you separate them, you can go in and create a border radius, which is going to round off the corner so you have something that looks something like this. Of course, this is going to look a lot better if we do actually have a little bit of padding around all the different columns and rows that we have in here. So let's go ahead and go inside of these and create a padding and just set this one to 20 pixels, just so we have a little bit of spacing in between. So going back inside the website, refreshing, you can now see that we have something that looks a little bit more like this. I feel like we're kind of like breaking the table right now because I have to show all these things. Now we can of course also go in and create a border style. So let's just go ahead and do it for the outer one. So if I were to go inside my table down here, I can create a border dash style. And I can set this one to dashed, dotted, double, groove, hidden, all these different stylings that we have down here. So if I were to pick dotted, go inside my website, refresh it, you can now see that we get a different styling for the border. So you can always go in here and always just, change this into whatever you want to. So we can take dashed in this case here, going back in, and then you can see it changes. So you can always customize this in any kind of way that you want to. And the same thing goes for coloring. So what I will do just to make sure that it doesn't look as messy in here is I will go back up and remove the border radius. And I will make sure that all the different borders are collapsed. So let's go ahead and do that. Go back inside the website and refresh it. So now I can see it looks something more like this. This is more normal. But what we can do is we can go inside and I can actually go ahead and create a border color. So if I want to have a certain color for these different borders, I can do that. If I were to go inside the table header here, we can actually change the border color by going directly inside the border property that we set here. Or there is also a separate property called border dash color where you can set it in here. So what we could do is we can just kind of like change it to make it look a little bit different. So let's pick bisque as it's called. Go back inside our website, refresh it, and then you can see we get some different colors for the borders here. Now let's just go ahead and remove this again because I just wanted to show you that you could actually go ahead and do that. But what I do want to show you is that we can actually go in and change the background color. So if I were to go down to the bottom here, I can go ahead and say something like the second row inside this table should have a certain color, just to kind of like distinguish the different rows from each other, because sometimes people will struggle a little bit when it comes to reading tables. So it's just kind of nice to have every other row another background color, just so you can see the differences between them. So what I can do is I can actually go ahead and do something very similar to what we did here. So every second row is going to be something specific. So what I'm going to do at the bottom here is I'm going to target the table row. So I'm just going to say table row. Then I'm going to say that I want to grab the nth child. And I want to grab every even inside this table here. Now we haven't actually used even before inside this course here, but essentially this just goes in and says that every even count. So, 1, 2, that's even, 3, 4, that's even, and then it continues, is going to have this piece of styling here. So what I could do is I could give it a background color. Let's go ahead and make this one a very light gray color. So we're just going to go in and we're going to give it a slightly grayish color like so. Save this one. Go back inside the website, and then you can see that every second one is going to have this color here. And the same thing goes for the columns, of course. You can also go ahead and take every second column and do the same thing if you want to do that. Now, just to demonstrate this properly, I'm going to go and add a couple more rows inside this table here, and I'm just going to copy paste what we have already because it's just for a demonstration. So as you can see, every second one is going to get colored in here. And now just to demonstrate one last thing when it comes to these different borders here, we do also have something called border spacing. So if I go back inside my CSS file, instead of saying that we want to have a padding, we can also include a border spacing, which basically means that all the different borders that are right now collapsing are going to have a certain spacing away from each other. So what I can do is I can say we have a border dash spacing. Oh, it doesn't actually show it in here. Spacing. There we go. And I can set this one to 20 pixels just to kind of demonstrate. So going back in here, refreshing, you can see that nothing happens, but that's because we right now have it set to collapse. So if I were to go in here and instead set it to separate, go back in, refresh it, you can now see that each border in between each other have a certain spacing. So if you want to have a spacing between all the different cells in here, you can use border spacing in order to get that result. Now, right now, we're not going to do that because it is kind of messing up our table here. So I'm just going to go back in here and I'm just going to remove the border spacing just so we don't have that. And I'm also going to go ahead and collapse our different cells so we don't have it all, with different borders. Now I'm almost done showing you exactly what we can do when it comes to these different tables. There's one more thing I want to show you, which is if I were to go back inside my index.html, and at the very top here inside my table, as the very first thing inside the table, and this is important, you have to put it inside as the first thing inside the table, we can actually go ahead and define a column group. And a column group is just basically a way for us to go in and group certain columns together and add a piece of styling to those together. And it's essentially just another way for us to go in and style multiple columns that are right next to each other if we want to do that. So what I can do if I want to group columns together is I can create a column group inside of here, again, as the first element right after the table. And inside of this one, we're going to define a column. So we're going to say we have a column tag, and inside of here, we can add a bunch of attributes in order to actually change how we want this column group to behave. The first thing you need to have is how much do you want this to take up when it comes to spacing. The second thing you need to have as an attribute is what do you want to change. So in the first one here, we can actually go ahead and say we want this to span a certain length. So in this case, if we can say the first 2 columns inside this table here, and we want to add a certain piece of styling to it. It is also important to note here that there's only certain pieces of styling you can add when it comes to adding a column group. These stylings are related to when it comes to the width, when it comes to the border, the visibility, and when it comes to the background. So that's the only things you can change using a column group. So if we were to go in here, I can actually say we want to maybe have a background color. So we can go and add in a background color and just kind of choose something from inside this list here. Let's pick aquamarine, just so we have something. And if I were to do this and go back inside my website, you can now see that the first 2 columns are getting a background color. Of course, these rows here are not getting anything because we already separately styled those inside the style sheet. So if I were to go back inside my style sheet here and just kind of remove that from down here at the bottom. So the nth child, that is going to be even. I'm just going to comment that out, so we don't have that. You'll now notice that everything is going to have this color here when it comes to the first 2 columns. If I want to add something on the other columns going forward, I can go back inside my index page, and I can just copy paste this column here. And then I'm going to define what the next columns in the series are going to have when it comes to a styling. So I could say the next 1 column is going to have this color here. So I'm going to change it and say I want to have a yellowish color instead. Then I might want to have the last column be another color, because remember, we're just grabbing one more column after the next one. So in this case, it's 1 because we only have 1 left. And I can go ahead and change the color for this one as well. So let's make it red. If I were to save this, go back inside the website, refresh it, you can now see that we can customize our columns in this sort of way, just so we get something a little bit different inside the website. So with that, that is how you can create a table inside your website if you want to customize it and create spacing and background colors and target every even cell or row or column inside the table. And this is just going to kind of allow for you to be able to create tables in the future when it comes to putting data inside your website if you have some sort of need for it. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.